I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in America I'm John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always are happily ever after.
Long ago and far away, deep in the heart of the countryside, there stood a large, bustling village. Here lived two peasants, called Pali and Georgie. Pali spent his days working hard on the land. He was a tall, large fellow who was often grumpy and rather bad-tempered. While his neighbour Georgie, who also worked hard in the fields all day, was a cheerful, friendly man. Though the two peasants were friends, they saw little of each other during the week, for they both worked hard from dawn to dusk. Once a month, they set out on a journey to walk together to a large market town some miles away. There they would purchase the seeds and tools they needed and stay the night with relatives before returning home the next day. They had made the journey many times and they always enjoyed themselves. As it took a long time to get there, Georgie and Pali would while away the journey by admiring the countryside or just chatting about this or that. As they walked on, the sun rose higher in the sky and they began to feel tired and hungry. As they still had some miles to walk, Georgie and Pali would stop for a rest when they came to an old farmyard which stood a little way back from the road. Here they could eat their lunch in peace without being disturbed by rowdy travellers who might pass. They were very thirsty, so the first thing they did when they arrived was to draw some water from the well. It was Georgie's job to draw the water, but first he would take off his bag and hand it to Pali. Pali would take the bags and go away to find them a comfortable place to sit. If they were lucky, they would find that the farmer had left some loose hay. And if he had, Pali would walk over to it with the bags and sit down. In the meantime, Georgie would draw the water and bring it over to where Pali was sitting. Georgie would first fill a cup of water for Pali, and then one for himself. Oh, how good the cold, sparkling water tasted after the long walk along the dusty road. They both felt much refreshed after the drink. Then they would settle down and see what their wives had packed them to eat. It always seemed a very long time since breakfast. It just so happened, as they were unwrapping their food, Georgie looked up from his lap And who should he see walking towards them but an old man? Georgie could see from the way the old man was walking that all was not well with him. They watched as the old man hobbled towards them. And Georgie, fearing that he might stumble and fall, jumped up, and taking the man by the arm, he slowly helped him to be seated on a wooden stump. "Good sir, are you ill?" asked Georgie, concerned. But no, the man was just very thirsty. Pally swiftly drew a cup of water from the bucket. The old man took the cup and drank down the water very quickly. As he handed back the cup, he sighed and said, "Oh, thank you, sirs. I was in sore need of a drink. My sister is very sick and I'm on my way to see her. I left home in such haste yesterday that I made no provisions. I have not eaten or drunk anything now for a day." "Then you must share our food," said Georgie kindly. "We have plenty for 3. "Oh, thank you," said the old man. Georgie and Pally unwrapped their loaves again. They began to break up the bread and sausages and hand some over to the hungry old man, who took it very gratefully. The old man told them about the fine farm he had, which now that he was old was run by his son. And they told him all about the land they had. They talked about the weather, seed prices, and many other things. And all the time they talked, they hungrily devoured the bread and sausage. Soon they were chatting away like old friends. The day was warm and sunny, and it was a pleasant way to take a rest from walking on down the long, dusty roads, for all 3 still had far to go. As Georgie and Pally shared out the last remaining bits of bread and sausage, they felt happy and relaxed. The old man had been revived by the good food, and colour had come flooding back to his pale cheeks. They were glad to be able to help someone in distress, and they were very concerned that the old man should reach his sister's bedside. At last, all the food was gone, and there was nothing left but a few crumbs. "Thank you for your kindness," said the old man. "But now I must be on my way, for I have many miles to go." The old man looked much better now. "Before I go," he smiled, "I would like to give you something for your kindness." The old man put his hand into his jacket and pulled out his purse. Neither Georgie nor Pally had any wish to take his money, for they had shared their food with the old man without any thought for being paid. "Please, you don't owe us anything," said Georgie. But the old man insisted, and out of his purse he took 5 pennies, which he handed over. "Please take this for your kindness," he said. When Pally and Georgie saw he was insistent, they saw there was nothing they could do but accept the money. Georgie thanked the old man and put the coins into his purse. Then they wished him a safe journey and watched as the old man hobbled out of the farmyard towards the road. It was also time for Georgie and Pally to leave, for they had plenty of business to do in town and they did not wish to be late. They packed up their belongings and set off once more on their journey. They felt much refreshed by their rest and good food and walked on with light steps towards the town. Part of their journey took them on a shortcut away from the road and through a forest. It was a pleasant change, and Georgie and Pally enjoyed this part of their journey. As they walked, Georgie continued to entertain Pally with his fund of funny stories, though Pally did not have much of a sense of humour, and so Georgie usually ended up laughing for them both. In the deepest part of the forest, they came upon the grave of a woodcutter. Pally and Georgie doffed their hats in respect, and because they both felt in need of a rest, they decided to stop here a while. As they sat on either side of the grave, enjoying the peaceful silence of the forest and the sweet smell of the air, Pally suddenly remembered the money the old man had given them. When Georgie saw Pally's face, he knew exactly what he was thinking. Georgie laughed as he took out the coins from his purse. "You want your share, don't you?" he chuckled. "Well, here you are, 2 pennies for your 2 loaves." Well, when Pally saw the 2 pennies, instead of smiling, he frowned. "I want 2.5 pence, he snapped crossly. "That's half of what he gave you." "But," said Georgie patiently, "I had more bread than you." "It doesn't matter," said Pally, very cross now. "He wasn't paying for the bread, just rewarding us for our kindness. What would have happened if he'd given us nothing?" Georgie thought for a moment, and then with a smile, he pointed up to the sky. "Well," he laughed, "I would be rewarded in heaven for my 3 loaves, and you would be rewarded for your 2. That wasn't good enough for Pally. "I'm not satisfied," he said. "I want half the money. Let's go to the town and see the judge." They jumped angrily to their feet. Georgie felt very insulted that Pally did not think he was being fair, and so he marched off after him. Yes, they would ask the judge to settle the matter. They walked on together in frosty silence. Not one word or smile passed between them. They both felt very angry and hurt, and were not going to give way in the argument. So, when they arrived at the town, they made straight for the judge's house. A market was being held, and the square was full of bustling, busy people buying fruit, meat, and vegetables from the stalls. Many farmers came from the surrounding villages to buy their goods here. Pally and Georgie did not even stop to look at the wares, but marched crossly up to the judge's front door. Inside the courthouse, the judge greeted the 2 peasants, and they in turn bowed to him. The judge could see they had a dispute, so he waved Pally to be seated and said he would listen first to Georgie's story. "Please begin," said the judge to Georgie. "Well, it all started, Your Honour," said Georgie politely, "when we stopped to take a rest today. We always stop to eat our lunch in a farmyard which is halfway on the road to town. We were just sitting down to eat our meal when this traveller came by. He looked very pale and tired. He told us how he was on his way to visit his sick sister and had left home in such haste that he had had no time to make provisions for the journey. He had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and was feeling very faint. So Pally and I gladly shared our bread and sausage with the old man. Now Pally had brought 2 loaves and I had brought 3. The old man was very grateful for our generosity, for without it he would have been too weak to continue his journey. To show his thanks for our kindness, the old man gave us 5 pennies. There had been no thoughts in our minds of being paid, and at first we did not want to take the money. But the old man insisted, so to please him, we did. Later, I gave Pally 2 pennies for the 2 loaves he shared, but he is angry and thinks he should get half the money. The judge then nodded and motioned to Georgie to be seated. Then he asked Pally to come forward and tell his story. So Pally came and bowed to the judge. The judge listened while Pally told him exactly the same story as Georgie had, but then he added, "Since all my bread was eaten too, I deserve half the money." "Why is that?" asked the judge. "Well," said Pally grumpily, "the man wasn't buying the bread. He was giving us something for our kindness. I shared all I had, as did Georgie. So it's only right and proper that I should be given half the money." The judge thought. First he looked at Georgie. Then he turned to Pally and said in a stern voice, "If you want justice, then you owe your companion 1 penny." Pally couldn't believe it. He owed Georgie a penny? Impossible. Fine justice this was. The judge was adamant, and he told Pally to go and sit down, for he had something to show them both which would help them understand his judgment better. Pally went and sat down next to Georgie and waited for the judge to call them. The 2 peasants sat there in silence, both of them believing that they were right. At last the judge called them, and they saw to their surprise that on his desk he had 5 loaves. The judge asked Georgie to hand over his 3 pennies, and these he carefully counted out on the table. Then he asked Pally for his 2 pennies, and he counted them out too. Then the judge took the loaf in the centre of the table and placed it on Georgie's side and asked if this was correct. The 2 peasants nodded. Yes, Georgie had had 3 loaves and Pally 2. Then the judge took up one of Georgie's loaves and began to cut it up. "Did you all eat the same amount of bread?" the judge asked, and Georgie replied that they had. "Good," said the judge, as he cut up the second loaf into 3 pieces. "Now watch carefully, both of you, and listen," the judge continued. "If there are 5 loaves, and each one is divided into 3 equal parts, how many pieces of bread does that make in all?" he asked Georgie. Georgie thought for a moment and then said, 15 pieces, Your Honour." "That's right," said the judge, as he finished cutting up Georgie's loaves. Then the judge looked at Pally, and taking one of his loaves, he began to cut it up. "So," continued the judge, "if 3 men eat 15 pieces equally between them, how many pieces does each man eat?" Pally thought for a moment and said, 5, Your Honour." "Correct," said the judge, as he cut up Pally's second loaf. "So, how many of those 15 pieces belong to you, Georgie?" asked the judge. 9, replied Georgie, and sure enough the judge counted out 9 pieces of bread. So Georgie was right. Then the judge turned to Pally. "Therefore you must have 6 pieces of bread," said the judge as he counted Pally's pieces, and Pally agreed. The judge paused a moment and then looked at the 2 peasants. Then he took hold of 5 pieces of Georgie's bread, and putting them forward he said to Georgie, "Here are the 5 pieces you ate." "And here are the 5 pieces you ate," continued the judge as he put forward Pally's bread. "Am I correct?" They both nodded, though they still had no idea what the judge was getting at. "So these are the 4 pieces the man ate of yours," said the judge to Georgie. Then he picked up Pally's 1 piece and said to Pally, "So the old man only ate 1 of your pieces of bread, while he ate 4 pieces of your companions. Now, if the man gave you 5 coins, that's 1 for each piece of bread he ate. So for that 1 piece of bread you should receive 1 penny. Your friend gave 4 times more bread to the old man than you did, and he also gave you more pennies than he needed to. I agree the man wasn't buying the bread, but rewarding you for your kindness. But you destroyed the spirit of his gift by demanding exact payment. Exact justice is what you wanted, and that is what I have given you." Then, much to Georgie's satisfaction and Pally's annoyance, the judge took one of Pally's pennies and put it with Georgie's pile. Picking up Georgie's 4 coins, he said solemnly, "Take these 4 pennies and be satisfied with the judgment." Then he took Pally's 1 penny and said, "Take this 1 penny and be satisfied with the judgment." With that, the judge dismissed the 2 peasants from his courthouse. So Pally and Georgie bowed to the judge and left. Pally was very cross that he had lost 1 penny, and off he marched. While Georgie was very pleased, for he thought the judge's decision was right and fair. A little while later, as Pally and Georgie were buying their provisions, they bumped into each other at one of the stalls. "Come, let's forget our quarrel," said Georgie. Pally thought, and because he had no wish to make the long journey home alone, he finally agreed. So the 2 peasants shook hands and were friends once more. They bought all the provisions they needed from the market, and then spent the rest of the day going about their separate business. Early the next morning, they set out for their village. They talked about this and that and made no mention to each other of the loaves, the 5 pennies, or the judge's decision. Instead, they talked about the price of seeds and the fine cheeses they had tasted at the inn. Soon it was time for a rest and something to eat, and so they stopped at the farmyard. There they settled themselves down on the soft hay and then took out their bags of food. Georgie had his usual 3 loaves, but when he looked at Pally's lap, he saw that he had only 2. "Oh, this is bound to lead to trouble," thought Georgie unhappily. It would be just their luck if another hungry old man turned up and wanted to share their food. What were they going to do? Pally looked very serious, for he knew what Georgie was thinking. Then his hand went to his bag, and what should he pull out but another loaf? He had had 3 all the time. Georgie had to laugh, and so did Pally, and they enjoyed the rest of their meal in peace. And from that day on, whenever Georgie and Pally walked into town together, they always made sure they had the same number of loaves, just in case they met another hungry